God is conceptualized in the story of Abraham as the call to adventure.
Yeah.
Okay, so Abraham is privileged. He's rich. He's in a state of infantile security. He doesn't have to do a damn thing till he's like 70. He has rich parents. He doesn't have to lift a finger. Okay. And then a voice comes to him that says, get the hell away from your zone of comfort. Leave your family, leave your tent, leave your community, go out in the world. Okay. Well, so what is that? Well, that's the same impulse that drives a child to develop. It's the impulse that drives a man to continue to mature, right? So you can think about it as an instinct if you want, the instinct to growth. Okay. God makes Abraham a deal. It's such a stellar deal. He says, look, if you listen to this voice of adventure, if you commit to it, if you live by its dictates, and you make the proper sacrifices along the way, this is what will happen to you. You'll be a blessing to yourself. Okay, so that's a good deal. That's a nice start, right? So you don't have to be miserable and self-conscious, right? Aware of your own nakedness. You can start to walk with God again. Okay, but more, you'll do that in a way that will ensure your valid reputation. So that's a good deal because you want to have a reputation that's distributed in the social community, obviously. And if it's based on something real, so much the better. Then you're not a charlatan or a fake or a psychopath. Okay, but that's not all. He says, you'll do that in a way that will enable you to establish a permanent dynasty that will cascade down the generations. And that's not all either. You'll do all that in a way that's beneficial to everyone else. So this is so cool because it speaks of, it's something like the tree of life. It speaks of a concordance, right, between the instinct to mature and develop, that calling of adventure, the pathway that actually works best for you, the pathway that works best for you and establishes something permanent in a manner that enhances your reputation, that cascades down the generations. Okay, now Abraham is offered, if he follows this pathway, God says, well, you'll be the father of nations. Okay, so now imagine this. This is contra the selfish gene, let's say. The human pattern of reproduction. Dawkins' mistake was that he thought reproduction and sex were the same thing. And they're not. They're not, especially not in the human case, because human beings are high investment, long-term maters, right?
Sure.
So we have very few offspring and we invest like mad in them. Pair bond, you live long enough to be grandparents, you put okay, so that means that to be the proper father, you have to act out a sacrificial ethos. Okay, the idea in the story of Abraham is that if you act out that sacrificial ethos properly, which aligns the spirit of adventure with the harmony of the community, you will act in a manner that best ensures the long-term survival of your offspring, right? So you can imagine it's not just the contribution of sperm to egg, it's the development of an ethos of paternal care that increases the probability that your children will be successful, but also in a way that increases the probability that their children will be successful. All right, so that's an alignment with a genuine cosmic order. It's not arbitrary. And so there are interpretations, we'll say, they're not just ideologies. They're not just arbitrary interpretations of the way the world lays itself out. They are in harmony with the cosmic order. And that's what makes them deep, sacred, fundamental, and in the truest possible sense. That is the proper rejoinder to the postmodernists. It's like, see, this is why they insist. This is why they're so anti-science in their ethos too. And this is where Sam Harris has got a point, because Harris likes to make a case for objective morality. Objective. It's like transcendent is the right word, not objective.
But did it actually happen? I'm kidding. What I was really interested thinking about that, and I just had 3 hours with Sam Harris where we sort of went around on that question, and I agree that I think his system fails essentially for what it's worth.
He's got a point. He wants to ground morality in something that isn't a mere postmodern illusion. And there's something to be said for that.
I want to know how much, like, the story of the Old Testament or the Hebrew Bible, the story of Abraham. Okay, train a large language model on that because it's integrated into the cosmic order, however you want to say it. How far do you go with this? I mean, like, do you train this model on the New
don't
Testament?
know.
Do you train it on the epistles?
We're playing with that. I don't know.
Do you train it on John Milton?
Good question. Dante.
Dante,
So
Ovid.
imagine, that's a very good question. So imagine that at the foundation, you have the biblical library. Okay, but then you have, like you said, the secondary literatures.
What about the Quran?
We want to train a separate one on the Quran.
Separate,
the
keep them
and then
apart.
we want to have them debate. Yeah. Well, what's really interesting in the case of Islam, because there's an insistence in the Islamic world that the entire epistemology is actually contained in the text and nothing else.
I think the mistake that people make in comparative religion between Islam and Christianity is that they think that the Bible in Christianity is what the Quran is in Islam.
Yeah, right.
I
That's
think
just not the case.
In Islam, the word becomes a book, and in Christianity, the word becomes a person.
Yeah.
I think Jesus is to Christianity what the Quran is to Islam, right?
Absolutely.
And that's probably,
and that's a big difference.
I think that's a mistake that people make, partly because, the Quran is infallible.
Right.
You can't think that any word of the Quran is wrong because it's the literal and altered word of God. Whereas with the Bible, you've got a bit more leeway, say it's mythology, or maybe there's a historical contradiction, but it's not actually that much of a problem. However, if you had Jesus in front of you, you can't contradict him, right? I think that's an important distinction for people to keep in mind.
That also makes the logos the living word.
Yeah,
right. It makes it
more difficult to put forwards the somewhat naive criticism that I think people often make of the Gospels as contradicting each other. Because again, like we're talking like historically here, was Herod on the throne at the same time Quirinius was the governor of Syria as Lucius?
Yeah.
And it's sort of like, in a sense, who cares? I mean, one of the points that my friend John Nelson has made brilliantly is, have you ever come across the concept of the what do they call it? The Churchillian drift, where a bunch of quotes that Churchill never said just get attributed to him. I find that the best breakfast is
that's part of the pattern of mythologization.
If someone says, I think
they fall into his orbit because they're of his type.
I think the best breakfast in the morning is a glass of champagne, a hearty glass of champagne, right? He never said that, but people sort of think maybe he said that.
Sounds like something Churchill might have said.
Same thing happens with C.S. Lewis. Now, the point that my friend John pointed out to me was that, well, if all you had, the only information you had about Winston Churchill was a book of apocryphal quotes that people had attributed to him and agreed that he'd said, you'd still probably get a pretty good idea about who Winston Churchill was.